Hello, potential friends and adventurers. I'm Em, and today we're going to talk about how to describe a town when role-playing. Welcome to the DM table. Now let's start with a small town, but of course what applies for a small town applies for a big town or a city. We'll just add to it afterwards. A small town, well, or a base or a camp or something that's sort of like a small town, all of them have basically their distinct flavor. And if you've ever played a video game or read a book, you'll notice that when some interesting location, usually with people, appears, there's some sort of introductory scene and there's a sort of a camera or a position to it that sort of shows some landmarks and general flavor. There's that feeling of, oh, this is a prominent feature that the person that was making the game or the book just pointed out by either a camera that sort of centers around it, or sort of view that centers around it, or description that sort of covers up to it and down from it in case it's a book. Like describing the walls, then the center church, then going back to the houses and so on. Now, whichever style you choose, and really you're probably supposed to integrate them all as long as you are not too long-winded, they sort of form a landmark that players will remember. And you want to sort of start by, especially with a small place, you want to start by describing the landmarks that are visible and recognizable, and how do people orient, because as with the dungeon room, you want to sort of point out what makes the whole thing tick in the mind of the player. How do they approach the problem? How do they want to solve the situation of being in this new place? What are the functional things? What are the things that they can see that would bring them functionality to their visit? So you want to describe those, and you want to describe things that stick out because players are curious, or at least you're assuming that they're adventurers, therefore curious, therefore interested in interesting things, and therefore you describe interesting things. And now it depends on speed and importance. If you have some important scenes, you'll describe them in full detail, but if you have sort of room until you make it to this or that building or something, then you can sort of enter in what I would like to call traversal mode, and then describe just sort of outlines of, say, of generally what kind of streets, what kind of architecture, what kind of situation are players in, and as they walk along, what they can see in not too much of a detail, just what sort of stands out, so that features of the place can emerge. And then when you get to the place of importance, then you can go in more detail, but mentioning just sort of what distinguishes this town as you imagine it, and you should imagine this, you should be able to see your town. Now, I don't know, I heard that some people don't get to see what they're describing, so I don't know how this is applicable for absolutely everyone, but I advise that you see in full detail your own town, and then you can describe it more easily. I don't know whether that's difficult, I just sort of, I guess I don't remember a time when I didn't do it, so I wouldn't know what kind of exercise goes into it. I guess I read a lot of books, so that's one thing, but instead of starting on that late, just try to project, try to imagine, try to see what's there, and this goes easier by sort of producing one thing after another. And this is good advice in DMing in general, in all of the DMing. One thing leads to a conclusion that leads to another thing, that leads to another conclusion, that leads to the third thing, and so on. So, if it's a street, what kind of street do you see? What kind of houses surround the street? Because, you know, an avenue is different than an alley, and so on and so forth. Then, what are the houses? What do they house? Are they stores? Or are they just regular houses and people live in them and so on? Or is it something third? And you want to sort of then connect. What kind of culture is this? What kind of architecture do they have? Why do they have it? What kind of sort of feeling is to walk amongst these houses, and so on and so forth. But you want to do this fast internally, and then sort of draw the lesson from that, and you can describe the town because, you know, things pop out to you, so you can then describe them to the players. And, well, if you're successful, great. If this isn't the technique for you, then, well, I guess write to me in the comments how it went, and I would love to help you in any way I can, and maybe we can think of something else. Anyways, you don't even need, with this technique, you don't even need to prepare for small towns. You draw the map as you see it. As the players are walking along, you're sort of almost removing the fog of war, if we're to imagine it in an almost real-time strategy way of looking at things. As they are passing through, they see things, darkness is removed, and you draw in the details. You don't have to draw too well, you can draw squares for houses. That's, you just need to sort of mark it in the space, and you don't need to draw everything, just important details. Aha, there's a tavern, draw that in. There's a store, draw that in. As much as import you put on it, and as much as importance players put on it. So if players are interested in a store that you didn't think was important, like if it's a store of gardening tools and flower seeds and vegetables and stuff like that, and you didn't think it's going to be important, but players, made a note of it and wanted to return later or even visit it now, just mark it down. If players visit something, you mark it down, even if it's a single house from a single quest that they visited to talk to that woman that if they visited, you mark it down and you fill it out, and try to give yourself enough room on the paper to achieve all this. And if that doesn't succeed, place another paper next to it. Use large papers. I do all this, and I don't mind sometimes having a two-part map if it runs away from the first paper, sort of. And then you'll have quite a lively feeling town if you keep doing this, and also describing what is sort of happening. That's not even necessarily any sort of quest hook or even foreshadowing or anything. You're just saying there are some children there playing with a dog and a ball or something like that. You just want to sort of impart what you're seeing and what kind of flavor the whole place has. Is it a rural community with lots of fields and smell of flowers permeating throughout? Does it have forest around? You want it to be a town but with feeling. So, put the feeling in the way you feel like you felt it. How did you feel it? What struck out at you that was so memorable, even though it was so unimportant? But keep it to normal brevity with ability to players sort of walk about and mention what they want to do, and you do all this between their lines, between their turns, sort of. Fill them in, so to speak. And sometimes you have a new group of players, so you want to help them along in some way. So maybe the town has a town greeter, or maybe a quest-related person waits for them, even if they don't have a quest there yet. Maybe somebody, even a simple merchant that has a wheel that broke off his cart that's just stopped in front of the town might help them. Heck, even if they don't ask, even if you're convinced that your players won't ask, what if it's a talkative merchant that just is gonna say, oh, you're not from around here? Well, let me tell you about our town. Our town has these landmarks, and what about that tavern? Oh, the beer there. See? If a talkative merchant does this, well, hopefully he's not too boring, but he can tell them a lot. And then, furthermore, you can have something much more interesting, like a person sort of waiting for them. Maybe not particularly them, but person is waiting for somebody to sort of be the right person for the quest they have. And when I say that, I don't mean a person is standing there waiting to say, I need help with this or that. I mean, sort of charm them into the flow of the town. What if somebody is waiting for somebody else, but they see a group of adventurers, and then they have an idea of what they could ask, and in return they could tell about the town or something. And by what they could ask, it's something that's not related to the players. It's interesting to the players if a person that's interesting to them asks them something that's irrelevant to them but interesting to the person, and maybe cool to know in general. because this might not spread into a quest that they play, but maybe it's like sort of witnessing a quest being played by somebody else and then they join them later if they like the person and then they sort of play together this quest or another quest rather. Well, all of that can happen and more. And then what about a large city? It may even have a map sort of placed there as a wooden board right immediately at the gates so that people can find their way easier. And you can hand them the map. And if it's a large city, you prepare the map, but you leave lots of blank space. You just mark the districts, you mark the sort of biggest things you already know about, and you leave lots of room so that you can draw in all those things that I mentioned earlier, and then you use that map and you draw in as people find out more about stuff. But if that map is featured at the gates of the city, then you need to sort of fill out important details that all the locals would know about and that would be featured prominently on the map. Now, don't forget to lay out further clues when there's time and there's nothing else done about factions in the town or whatever you think is important, through atmosphere, through happenings, through news, through rumors, whatever people are doing or saying or thinking on the street. And by thinking, I do mean you can say city has atmosphere of unease, but also of preparation for the upcoming this or that, and so on. Lots can be said through the atmosphere of a place. In fact, almost all can be said through an atmosphere of a place. You just need to sort of look into how atmospheric you want your descriptions to be. And if you want them to be lots atmospheric, well, just keep them to the point and brief yet atmospherically descriptive, and you'll be successful in describing the atmosphere. And then players may investigate into further clues when they have the time or want to, or just ask questions directly, and they may have abilities or skills or memories that tie into this, and as such they'll get more clues, more descriptions, and you'll be able to sort of back and forth into all kinds of play and quests, and all kinds of stuff will really come up from this, and the town will be well lived in. And also, don't forget, you don't need to describe everything as detailedly as you describe things that they are directly interacting with. The other things can get a passing description a little bit, and then, well, leave some for later, even if you know what it is, and even if you want to hit with all the flavor you know. You don't need to do all that at once. When they pass the same street again, or pass the similar street again, you can do that. Because as soon as the place becomes important enough to visit multiple times and to walk through it back and forth, you have multiple opportunities to do this, filling out more and more and more, and therefore the thing becomes more lived in, and players feel like they know it well, because they've seen things, they kept seeing things, they kept walking around. It like builds a real feeling of visiting a city and walking through it, doing things, going places, doing jobs. You know, it creates full flavor of the place, but gradually. And this also depends on the importance of when and how much flavor do you want, depending on the quests you have prepared and the campaign. But aside from that, try to sort of save some for later, and then use it later, and it will all work out. What also further defines the place is sights, sounds, landmarks, customs, things that players don't really over time interact with until they do, as in it's not important for the quest, but it is important for the campaign perhaps, or it's not even important for the campaign, but it's important for the campaign feeling, or it's not even important for campaign feeling necessarily, but it's sort of a feature of the town and it's there. And it can be a small thing. You know, as I said, smells can describe a lot, whether it's bakeries or forges, events in the town. There's lots of things that can happen that are happening by themselves. Maybe two factions are having a fight, and they have their units locked into combat occasionally against each other, and that's something that has still nothing to do with players, but it's there. And let's not forget those local customs I just mentioned. These can really flesh out a culture, so make sure to see whether they're a bit different, a lot different, why are they important, and how do they influence the situation that the players might find themselves in from day to day. Now, you don't need to go all out on these, and they usually are supposed to be there when they are actually influential, when the culture is different, when the culture is either flavorfully interesting to the players. And how would you guess this? Well, really, you should probably aim for a world that's actually interesting for your players. So you shouldn't just have customs to have customs, you should have customs that are fun to have in your world. Yeah, I know, it's sort of not traditional almost in tabletop to have great fun local customs because they're just great to have, but what if we do? What if we do explore cool, interesting, nice cultures that we would like to sort of participate in? Why wouldn't we? In fact, you can have local customs of hometown or city of each player or the group. You can have even more than that, and each of them could be either slightly strange and mostly beneficial, or pretty beneficial and not that strange at all, just as long as you have good ideas, or not have them really almost at all whatsoever. But why don't we just use them for all kinds of interesting and cool purpose that we can find for them? That is probably better than just having random local customs that may or may not be just weird or boring. And adventure, if you thought this was unique, maybe you can spare a click, and I would get to see you here next and perhaps every week. Till next time, I wish you luck on your adventures. Bye.